Welcome to Roundhill Radio. Through our conversations, we discover the holy in the ordinary, find moments of grace and peace, and redefine what we talk about when we talk about faith. Hey, Ed.
Hi, Leslie.
How's it going?
It's going great. How about you?
Good. We're halfway through December.
Wow.
Are you feeling Christmassy yet?
Slowly.
Getting there.
Embracing it.
Getting there. As a lead into our conversation today, we discovered that the great Reverend Dr. Ed Horstman has not yet seen The Muppets Christmas Carol.
Shocking.
So this is now on your to-do list, I believe.
It jumped right to the top.
And now all I can think of is the songs in my head of the great film, The Muppet Christmas Carol, which I was telling you before is easily, in my mind, it's vying for the top spot of the best Christmas movie of all time.
All right.
That and White Christmas.
I'm going to give it a careful viewing.
And the thing is, too, because it's Michael Caine and the Muppets. So
Wow.
already you've got a winning combination. And he plays the whole thing like it's Shakespeare.
Oh,
I mean, he
beautiful.
plays it with such dedication
and focus
to the craft that when Marley and Marley, who are Muppets, come up, and who the two guys that sit up in the theater and do the heckling, they play Marley and Marley.
Oh, beautiful.
And they come in, they sing a whole song. And
I'm ready.
it is all that is good and pure in this world. And
Well,
I'm
we need
so
more of
excited
that,
for
for
you.
sure.
I'm so excited for you that you get to see this for the first time. Which leads us in because we were going to talk a little bit about
Yes.
Ebenezer Scrooge.
We are.
And who was the other person?
Joseph.
Not two names I would have put in the sentence together. So I'm excited to hear your thoughts on this.
My rendition of this?
I'm excited.
I like putting different colors together and seeing how they interact.
Yeah, this
Right?
feels like
Different foods together.
neon green and like a earthy burgundy.
Yeah, raw umber or something. Yeah.
Something quite different.
Well, first of all, I have to confess, Joseph is one of my favorite characters in the Bible.
Really?
Yep. Of course, he's on the stage for a very, very short time.
Yeah.
So you have to pay attention to his appearance because once he's there and he does what he's supposed to do, we really don't hear a lot about him.
No,
We don't hear anything about him, to be
No.
more precise, right?
Well, what is it about him that draws you in?
Well, he didn't want to be part of the whole thing.
the reluctant hero.
I think it's so perfect because so often when we think about, people of faith and the saints and our ancestors and the tradition and all of that, which is wonderful, but we usually think about them as being like willing accomplices to the great spiritual adventures of their time.
Sure.
Right? I don't think that's really how it goes most of the time, like thanks but no thanks.
Yeah.
And there's a great biblical tradition of what I would call the reluctant prophet, right?
Yes.
The person who says, no, thanks.
Do I have to?
Right. Do not want to be part of that. And that's said and done.
Mm-hmm.
So Joseph stands in actually a very long and revered tradition of naysayers. And I think I can identify with this. I've just watched a movie with Susan, my spouse, and it involves people who had to speak up with courageous voices against an injustice that they saw. And what's really brilliant about this is that they were scared to death to do it. They didn't want to do it. They knew that they could get in big trouble for standing up and all of that. And I think that's how Joseph felt.
Yeah.
So he gets this, astonishing news. He's basically attached somewhat legally and formally to this young woman, Mary, and they're betrothed to one another, and they're going to get married. And she has a little surprise announcement for him. Baby on the way.
It's a lot.
Wait, what?
Wait, what?
Right? So he's definitely not on board with that.
Mm-hmm.
There are some really, horrifying outcomes in this situation for Mary.
Right.
Being pregnant and not attached to a husband, and where does the baby come from, and so on. I mean, she's at risk. Her life is at risk, quite literally. And even if she gets away with it, in a sense, moves through this terrible situation with her life, there's the lifelong ostracism and alienation can come. Joseph thinks he's doing her a favor when he says he resolves to put her away quietly. What, like what a huge favor.
Oh, slow clap. Slow clap, Joseph.
Exactly. Yep. But again, here's a man working within a tradition, and we keep him in context. We do our best.
Yes.
And but someone sneaks into his life in the middle of the night, and it is an angel who says, "Do not be afraid to take Mary as your wife." And astonishingly, that's pretty much all it takes in his case, which is amazing. But when I read that passage and then think about the great change that came over him, by the way, he's described as a righteous man. So,
Okay.
He's got this, in his own context, he's considered a really good person. But it turns out he can get a lot better than good. And it turns out to be good for Mary and good for Jesus, right? But there's another person who experiences someone sneaking into his life in the middle of the night, and that's our friend Ebenezer Scrooge, who I'm going to get a whole new perspective on with Michael Caine and the Muppets.
With Marley and Marley, the theater hecklers.
Right? So I've been thinking about these two people and how each of them went through a significant change. Each man was headed in a certain direction, and there looked to be absolutely no chance of changing that direction, but they did. And because of the intervention of something unknown, elusive, spiritual, right, coming to them in the middle of the night. And then because of the way they change, they bring really good things to the people around them. And in each case, a man becomes a father to someone not his child, in a sense. I mean, in Scrooge's case, it's to little tiny Tim there, and who's ill, but nevertheless, he's going to become a fatherly presence, let's put it that way. And Joseph becomes basically the father of Jesus. And when that little family needs to get scarce because they are targeted by Herod, he then helps to lead the family away, he and Mary together. So it's amazing how these two characters are so much a part of the Christmas drama. And then, of course, Ebenezer Scrooge, his story is limited to the story of A Christmas Carol. In Joseph's case, he does what he does, and then he more or less disappears from view.
Yeah.
So that's it. But I mean, in that moment when these people are on stage, they make amazing things happen, and they achieve a much greater sense of goodness or righteousness than perhaps they could have done on their own. So I'm fans.
I like it.
I'm a fan of both of them.
I'm fascinated by this idea of him being described as righteous.
Right.
As a modern person,
right?
How are we to interpret that? Like, what is that saying to the reader? Like, what is the author intending for us to know about Joseph?
Well, we have the sense that he's descended from a significant lineage. He comes from the line of David, so he can trace his ancestry back to a great king. We get the impression that he's called righteous because he seems to be a person who's recognized in his community as one who is a follower of the Jewish traditions and laws. Let's say in an exceptional way. Like this is somebody you would identify in a faith community and say, that's a really good person.
Okay.
Right? We really think that's a great person. And maybe Joseph was even an individual upon whom others sought to model their lives. And so that's the righteousness. It's someone who is especially attentive to the really vast body of legal codes that would have been inherited from the past. And he would have been acknowledged as such within the community. Turns out, though, that there is a higher level of righteousness to which he can attain. And that's because of his love for this child and caring for this child and the child's mother, something he hadn't anticipated.
Yeah.
Makes me think of stories that I've been reading about the civil rights movement. Been reading a lot about the civil rights movement this year and thinking about so many people who were engaged in that. And there were many people who were very law-abiding citizens who had to break certain laws in order to achieve a higher righteousness, right? So they had to, cross lines that of behavior and standards in order to be more inclusive, right? And to show a greater sense of justice. It was illegal to sit, if you were a black person, to sit at a lunch counter, right? So breaking that law was pointing to a greater righteousness. And so there's a long tradition of that. Maybe we can even trace that back to people like Joseph.
And we never hear what happens to him after that?
There's nothing in the biblical tradition that gives us any information. And I think over the years, probably people of faith have tried to fill in the details. But there's nothing that gives us any sense of what happened to him, which is interesting.
Right.
You know, it's that mystery sits there in a sense in the middle of Jesus' life, because by the time, I mean, we continue to hear about his mother, continue to hear about other members of the family, but not about Joseph.
Right, because she shows up for the rest of his story.
Correct.
Of Jesus' story.
Yep. All the way up to his death.
Right.
So it's curious.
It is curious.
Right.
To dig in, maybe. I don't know. It's fascinating.
Yeah,
That is really fascinating.
So these two figures, very different in background, yet both of them become, in a sense, fatherly figures. They both achieve a much greater sense of righteousness because of the intrusion. And I think that's the other kind of interesting thing. You know, for Scrooge, it's like his question to the nightly ghosts are, you know, is this what is going to happen, or is this what might happen?
Yeah.
Right. So he has a choice. And I think in each case, you get the sense that there's heavy pressure.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
To do the right thing. But there's also a sense in which they still can choose. And I think God's not going to force our hand. But on the other hand, you know, God loves us as we are and loves us enough not to leave us as we are.
That's nice. I like that.
That's my take on this.
Be warned, the ghost of Christmas Future
is
terrifying.
I'll watch in the early part of the
evening.
evening.
Make sure Dot the dog is there to protect you, because it's still terrifying.
I will keep her close by.
Frightening. I remember watching it as a child and being like, can we skip this part? I want to skip this part. I would have never thought to put those two characters together, but this idea that you're sort of headed in a certain way, and then this, you know, sort of outside force pings you off into something new and something greater.
Yep.
In these instances.
And initially super inconvenient.
Yeah, that's true.
Putting it mildly.
Right. Scrooge was just trying to get some sleep.
Right. Exactly. He ate his bowl of gruel.
Right. Feet up by the fire.
You know, over the years, and I would have to say this is true myself, in my experience, that so often, like the good things that we manage to do when we do pluck up our courage and get together with other people and make something happen.
Yeah.
Quite often when people look back at those moments, they will say, what was I thinking? Like, I didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
My life was fine, or my life was full, or I didn't want anything. And suddenly I wound up getting totally involved and immersed in this cause or helping this person.
Right.
So often that happens. And it's not that we're always veering away from compassion. It's just that sometimes the direction that the Spirit wants us to move in is not something we would just automatically think, yeah, that's where I want to go. Right. So I think we probably live with like a secret hesitation about this, like, hope that's not going to happen to me. You know?
Sure.
I don't want that dream.
We have kind of like our rhythm, our plans, our routines, and we're kind of headed. I definitely know about myself that once I make a plan, it's tough to veer me off of that. So it would definitely I would need like a full burning bush.
Maybe 4 ghosts.
I think I would need another one. I need a bonus one.
A bonus ghost.
Just to be like, come on. No, seriously.
Look, I think for most of it, it might take some work, right?
Right.
And some banging at the door. We're big on, from early on, we're encouraged to try to control our destiny and map it out and plan it out. Why do we have all these goals and calendars with, goals in them, the goal setting and everything?
And smart goals.
Smart goals.
Things, right?
Yeah. And then these other things come in as kind of what I want to say is as a blessed intrusion, right? Because in the end, some remarkable things happen. But there is risk along the way. And I think that's what these stories say. I mean, Joseph must have been wondering, heading out of town, like, I've given it all up. You know,
what's happened here?
I was a good guy.
Right.
And, what did I do to deserve this?
Oh.
Right. But it's such a great story. And the fact that we don't have, a darn bit of detail about it sort of gives us a little bit of room to put our own imagination spin on there. But I'm taking these two with me this year through Christmas, these two people, because who knows how that Spirit will work in our lives. And it could be in very small ways. It doesn't have to be something gigantic or dramatic. I don't think the Spirit ever stops working with us, looking for collaboration. And I think that's part of the big message of Christmas that's easily forgotten. God works in the world through human beings like Jesus, but it's not only Jesus. He becomes the representative model, in a sense, of what it looks like to love the world like God loves the world. So we get to figure out what that looks like in our own lives, in really, I would almost hesitate to say tiny ways, because it might look tiny at the inception, but turn out to be something really big.
Yeah. We'd love to hear any of our listeners, if there's been a time when you've been making your plans and going on your way and something has come in and knocked you off your path, and maybe something great came out of it, or maybe it was a difficult thing or whatever. We'd love to hear from you. We have a email form right at the top of roundhillradio.org. So we'd love to hear from you and join our conversation. I think of us as sort of, every time we record a podcast, it's sort of like a 3-person conversation. It's us two and it's you. And so we'd love to hear from you. So roundhillradio.org. And thanks for listening. Round Hill Radio is brought to you by the friends and members of Round Hill Community Church. For more information, please visit roundhillradio.org.